So welcome to part 2, or our second video of this lecture, which is about body paragraphs and the basics of body paragraphs. I'm moving on to the next one. After the topic sentence, we need to add support. And so in order to continue with the same thread that we've started on, the same argument, I found 2 resources that will use as support for my topic sentence. One of them is a government website. It's called U.S. Energy Facts Explained, and that should be in quotation marks, my bad, another typo. And then the second one is Christina Nunez's What Are Fossil Fuels? It was published on the National Geographic website. So in order to kind of dive into one of these body paragraphs, I'm going to select topic sentence 1. Which is our current sources of energy, namely fossil fuels and other non-renewable sources of energy, are a major part of what drives global warming. So we are going to pursue that argument in our very first body paragraph. So if you break that down, what we need to support is that the United States' primary source of energy is fossil fuels and other unsustainable resources, and that they are major contributors to global warming. So reading through those articles, I found 2 pieces of support that will specifically help this topic sentence. For support 1, I'm using an example of a paraphrase. I got the information from a chart in the article. And since you can't quote a chart, I paraphrased the information in the chart. So it reads, according to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption and natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy resources are renewable. And then support number 2 supports the second part of that topic sentence, and it is a quotation from the National Geographic article. It reads, when fossil fuels are burned, they release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which in turn trap heat in our atmosphere, making them the primary contributors to global warming and climate change. So let's see how to put that all together. Oh, first I have notes about quotes and support in general. These are just a few things to remember before moving forward. So first of all, the support on the previous page includes not only a quote, but a paraphrase. A paraphrase is a representation of information found in one of your sources written in your own words. You can use quotes or paraphrases in your body paragraphs. Either one is okay. Just make sure that you can see at the bottom, you want to cite it correctly, even if it's a paraphrase and it's written in your own words. If you got the information from another source, that means you need to appropriately cite it or attribute the information to the writer of the source. So we'll get more into that later. And then the other thing is that the support on the previous page directly addresses what the topic sentence aims to prove. So you want this support to be specific to your topic sentence and not just like a general statement about your topic. Now let's build them all together. So we're going to start with our topic sentence. It reads, our current sources of energy, namely fossil fuels and other non-renewable sources of energy, are a major part of what drives global warming. And then we added our first support. According to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption and natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy sources are renewable. So that's a really good start. The topic sentence kind of flows easily into the support, and we don't really need any supporting sentences to further explain the topic sentence. But there's something else we have to discuss before we add our second support, and that is adding analysis. So before we continue with the second piece of support, we need to explain and analyze the first support. Think of support and explanation as building blocks. After your topic sentence, you could kind of layer on as much support and explanation as you need, as long as each piece of support is discussed in some way, in a relevant way. There are a few ways that you could talk about your support. You can explain it, clarifying parts that need it, analyzing it. You could offer a critique of the support that you use, which is kind of advanced, but I say if you're comfortable, go for it. You could compare and contrast it with other support, showing how it builds from other support or illustrating it with an example. Those are just a few ways, but students have gotten pretty creative as to how they kind of synthesize the information. Your ultimate goal here is to use your logic and reasoning to demonstrate why the support helps to prove your point. So let's add the explanation component here. So we started with our topic sentence. Our current sources of energy, namely fossil fuels and other non-renewable sources of energy, are a major part of what drives global warming. We're continuing on to support 1. According to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption, natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy sources are renewable. And then we've got our explanation here. Petroleum and natural gas are both types of fossil fuel, which are made of ancient decomposed animals and plants and are incredibly carbon rich. Clearly, almost all of our energy, which we use for things like heating, cooling, electricity, and transportation, comes from these finite sources. So let's talk about why that explanation is good. It explains some key words in the support as well as a topic sentence, such as fossil fuels, petroleum, and natural gas. So these might be concepts that people aren't super familiar with. It shows how fossil fuels are non-renewable by explaining where they come from. So we know that this is not a renewable resource. It's something that happened years ago. It's in the ground, and one day we're going to run out. And then it shows why fossil fuels are so widely used, right? We use them for pretty much all sources of our energy. In doing these things, they make the way that the support applies to the topic sentence clear. I hope that makes sense to you all. So we're going to add another building block, actually 2 more building blocks of support and explanation. So we're continuing from the original paragraph. I'm just going to read the whole thing so you could see how it all becomes synthesized. Obviously, the topic sentence is bolded. The support is in red, and then the explanation is in black. Okay, so it reads all together. Our current sources of energy, namely fossil fuels and other non-renewable sources of energy, are a major part of what drives global warming. According to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption and natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy sources are renewable. Petroleum and natural gas are both types of fossil fuel, which are made of ancient decomposed animals and plants and are incredibly carbon rich. Clearly, almost all of our energy, which we use for things like heating, cooling, electricity, and transportation, comes from these finite sources. But more importantly, when fossil fuels are burned, they release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which in turn trap heat in our atmosphere, making them primary contributors to global warming and climate change. So you can see I've added the second piece of support, and I've cited it here. Well, again, we'll talk about citing a little bit later. So not only will these energy sources expire at some point, they also play a major role in the degradation of our environment. Again, explanation, we're interpreting that piece of evidence. Nunez also points out that non-renewable fuels supply about 80% of the world's energy. Exploring greener sources of energy can make a major positive impact in the health of our environment. And as one of the countries in the world with the highest energy usage, the United States has a responsibility to do so. So you can see that I'm using little clips of support and synthesizing it into my paragraph. It becomes part of the discussion. I'm interpreting it in my own way and showing how that serves my topic sentence, which in turn serves my thesis statement. So again, if you could see how these are used as building blocks, right? They kind of build on each other. Sorry, cat, get down. And they come to some sort of point, right? There's not it doesn't like leave you hanging in any way. So here's the last thing. Remember when I talked about citing your sources, there are 2 major ways to do it, and both are done in our sample paragraph. So one way, which I tend to encourage because it helps you integrate the sources smoothly, is to use a signal phrase or a grouping of words that contains the author's name or article title and indicates that the quote is coming. So, for example, the first piece of evidence here. According to a chart in U.S. Energy Facts Explained, petroleum makes up 35% of our energy consumption and natural gas 34%. Only 12% of our energy sources are renewable. So again, that signal phrase, according to a chart in the U.S. Energy Facts Explained, that signifies where it came from and that some information is coming forth. You can use that to introduce a quote or a paraphrase. The other way to do it is to use an in-text citation or the author's name. If that's not available, use the author's title, the article title. So prioritize the author's name, but if for some reason it's like a government source or like a corporate source and there's no available author, use the article title. So here you see But more importantly, when fossil fuels are burned, they release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which in turn trap heat in our atmosphere, making the primary contributors to global warming and climate change. And then you can see at the very end, there is the author's last name, and that is in parentheses there. So those are just some things to remember. This is the end of the presentation. I guess key takeaways are: stick to the backbone of your paper, which is your thesis, elaborate on it in a clear and logical way, make sure that you incorporate your support. And yeah, use the building block concept. If you feel like you're stuck, maybe think about how you could elaborate on the topic that you're talking about, and just make sure each paragraph is focused on their topic sentence. And you should be good. The end. Thank you for watching.